One, two, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome to the Sales Hacker Podcast. I hope wherever you are safe, you are sound, you are having some opportunity to go outside during the day. I personally, as I record this, am feeling a little stir crazy. The days are just all the same. Sometimes it's a problem and sometimes it's not. I'm working harder than ever. But anyway, it's not about me. It's about today's show. And today's show is an interview. It's probably it's in my top. And I mean that sincerely because it's such a real conversation. It's a conversation with Devante Lewis-Jackson, who is most recently a sales manager at the Muse. As of this, when we recorded it, he was on the market, but he's, I'm sure, going to find a gig somewhere soon. But we talk about his experience as a black man in America in sales, how he got into sales. He is the founder of Revenue Collective of Color, which is the sub-community that we've created within Revenue Collective for people of color. And we just have a very honest conversation about his experience, about race in America, and about what it's like in situations where a lot of times me or people like me can't really, that we can empathize, we can imagine, but we don't know. And so I really enjoyed the conversation. I thought it was one of the better conversations we've had on the podcast. And it was inspiring to me, and it was nice to know that we could have an honest conversation like that and have it be that meaningful. So before we get there, of course, we have to thank our sponsors. We've got a new sponsor on the show, a really great company, Chorus.ai. So as companies adapt to this, I'm about to read their copy. This is me describing to you Chorus. So Chorus, as companies adapt to this new normal, keeping your sales team moving together is more essential than ever. Chorus.ai is a conversation intelligence platform that provides key insights into the sales conversation your team is having every day. Record, share, review, and coach your team based on the voice of your customer. With Chorus.ai, get your reps to hit quota consistently, ramp your new hires faster, and replicate your unicorns through coaching initiatives, all while together or fully remote. Go to chorus.ai/sales hacker to try it for yourself. Our second sponsor is Outreach, the #1 sales engagement platform. Outreach revolutionizes customer engagement by moving away from siloed conversations to a streamlined and customer-centric journey. Leveraging the next generation of artificial intelligence, the platform allows sales reps to deliver consistent, relevant, and responsible communication for each prospect every time, enabling personalization at scale that was previously unthinkable. Check them out at www.outreach.io. Without further ado, let's listen to my conversation with Devante Lewis-Jackson. Hey everybody, it's Sam Jacobs. Welcome to the Sales Hacker Podcast. On today's show, we're excited and lucky to have a friend of mine and a colleague and somebody that I crossed paths with in previous roles, a man named Devante Lewis-Jackson. Let me tell you a little bit about Devante. First of all, he's one of the top rising sales leaders and account executives and just people that can help companies grow in the New York City area. We worked together when I was at the Muse, and so was he. Also, importantly, I guess from a self-interested perspective or from a community perspective, he is the founder and the leader of a community that we call Revenue Collective of Color, which is a sub-community within the broader Revenue Collective focused on people of color, focused on Black people, and helping create a safe and inclusive space for Black people, Black sales professionals, Black marketing professionals that can join a broader global community, but also have a place for themselves, managed by themselves, where they can also talk about issues that are specific to what they face every day. So we're going to talk about a lot of that and also just talk about Devante's approach to salesmanship and his sales career. So welcome, Devante, to the show.
Sam, thanks. I'm glad to be here.
We're excited to have you. So I guess tell us your current situation and however you're comfortable describing it for the listeners out there.
I'm pretty comfortable. I think it's a reality that a lot of folks are facing. So most recently, I was with a company called the Muse, where you said, Sam, you and I crossed paths for about 5 years. And I was part of a reduction in force. So the company went from around 80 or 90 people on their team page to under 40. So that was it was about 2 weeks ago. But again, I mean, anyone who has a LinkedIn profile or social media or just is not under a rock right now, you're seeing a lot of organizations are, dealing with the impact of COVID-19 from an economic perspective, and they're, either furloughing people or outright letting them go. And I was a part of the latter group of people.
Well, there's no, as I mentioned on LinkedIn, I've been fired many times, as you are aware, actually. So there's absolutely, at least for you, it wasn't personal. I'm sorry to hear it, but I'm sure you're going to get back on your feet. We're excited to have you on the show. So tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into sales, I think it helps to start like, where are you from originally? And then walk us through the journey of making your way into the world of kind of technology and software sales.
Yeah. So to not be too long-winded, I'm from Jersey through and through. I was born in Freehold. My parents they just graduated from high school. So I was born the summer before college. Imagine that. They both had other plans, but decided to stay local to, of course, take me and raise me as close as they can. So my dad, he ended up going to Seton Hall University, which is about an hour away from home. And my mother went to Georgian Court University, which is actually in Lakewood. So fortunate enough for her, there was a school there. So spent my time kind of bouncing back and forth between them in New Jersey. Ultimately wanted to follow my dad's footsteps and go to Seton Hall. While there, started working at the Apple store. So a little bit of retail sales experience, which, personally, I think retail or people who were waitresses or waiters, bartenders, and so on, they have a little bit of an edge to them. So they can make really great salespeople. But after Apple, I decided I was supposed to get a real job, right? Tuck my shirt in every day, go sit in an office. So I started working at Nissan North America and their regional headquarters. So it wasn't at a dealership, was actually in an office setting. Interestingly enough, I had actually been hired right after their own reduction in force. So folks weren't exactly excited to see me because they had friends that they had been working with for years that were gone. So it wasn't a great environment for me. I also wasn't familiar with, what folks did in summertime out in the Hamptons or having boats and so on. So I really wasn't able to relate to a lot of the older, more senior people that were there that I was working for, and decided I wanted something new. Found a company called the Muse and actually was applying to jobs on the site and said, you know what, I want to work here. And I was the person that most sales leaders might not hire right now because I didn't want to be in sales. I didn't care what I did. I was indifferent. I just wanted to work for this company. And I slid into the DMs on Twitter of the then VP of marketing. And for like 6 to 7 weeks straight, I was DMing him regularly, whether it was Eagles stuff that we were both bonding over or outright saying, I want to come work for you and with you at the Muse. And he finally responded and said, listen, I'm not hiring for anyone on the marketing team. And you might not know this yet, but you have a lot of sales skills. So he introduced me to Doug Freeman, who's actually another Revenue Collective member now. And Doug took a chance on me, gave me my first shot. And I've been able to, or was able to, I should say, rise through the ranks at the Muse from account executive to team lead and finish my tenure there as a mid-market sales manager.
So first of all, I have a couple of questions. One of them is, why did you think you didn't want to be in sales?
So I think like most people, and this is, one of the tenets of RCOC and the Revenue Collective in general, but I had a really bad idea or character of what sales was, right? It was selling someone something they didn't need. If you think about whether it's like hip hop songs or, all of the sleazy things people say, right? Selling water to a whale and all that other stuff. I just assumed that sales was in fact convincing someone to do something that they didn't want to do. So I definitely had a negative perspective of what a salesperson was. So that's why I was reaching out to the VP of marketing. But luckily, my mind was changed, and here we are.
Is your mind changed? Tell us what you think of sales now.
So I don't want to say the cliche, sales is helping people, because there is a bit of getting people to do stuff, not necessarily when they don't want to, but potentially before they want to, right? Getting them to move with urgency. But I think sales is literally finding out where someone or where an organization is, figuring out where they want to be and seeing if your product or service can help them get there. If it can, cool, go for it. If not, then you're being kind of sleazy.
Interesting. But also maybe they don't know where they want to be. Maybe that's part of it. Not everybody knows where they want to be. So maybe you can help see if the way that you think the world should be aligns with the way they think the world should be. Do you agree with that or no?
I would agree with that. But I think if there really isn't a world where you're in alignment on that end goal for them, right? Like if you can convince them that ideal state is where they should be and they agree there, then you can come back and say, okay, how do we get you there? So maybe we can take a step back and agree on that, agreeing on selling them on where they should be, getting on the same page there, and then helping them get there. But if their future state is not in line with what you have for them, then you're just trying to push them in the direction they don't want to go.
Makes sense. I agree with you. 5 years at the Muse, rising up through the ranks, starting as an account executive, then team lead, then manager. From your perspective, and we love the Muse, so it's not about the company. It's really more, what surprised you about being a manager? And what do you think the key differences are? Like if you're going to go back in time to yourself, 1 year into your time at the Muse, you're crushing it as an ingenue, like a prodigy salesperson that's closing a bunch of deals. and you say, I've come back from the future to tell you what it's like to really be a sales manager. Here's the things you need to know. What are those things?
So for me, I actually have broken it down into like 4 phases. And I think part of this might be like something I heard somewhere on like a podcast or something. But my job as a manager, and I would say, hey, Devante, your job as a manager is to do 4 things. It's to support, empower, remove roadblocks, and inform leadership, right? So from a support perspective, providing air cover is really important. Not coming in and closing deals for your reps, but being able to get in a call with them, get in the weeds, as needed, but also empowering them is making sure that they feel like they can play around the edges, they can push the needle, and that they're being given autonomy to run their deal process, right? So that's supporting them and empowering them. Removing roadblocks is really important. Some of them your team's never even going to know about. It could be something that's getting pushed down from leadership that you push back on and it never makes it to them. In other cases, it could be just internal friction where you need to go and talk to a different team and get them to view things through the eyes of a salesperson, which could be very helpful. And then the last thing is informing leadership, which in a way will end up helping your sales reps, but that's more of how you can help the company in terms of saying, hey, here's what I'm hearing on the front lines. Our product doesn't align with this, or here's what I'm hearing on the front lines. This other competitor is starting to come up and we need to get ahead of them. But, for me, the 4 tenets of a good sales manager would be supporting your team, empowering them, removing roadblocks, and then informing leadership, on what you're getting from the front lines.
Cool. Did you develop that framework yourself?
I can't take credit for it, but I listen to so many podcasts and YouTube videos and books that I can't remember where I got the bits and pieces from. But those are the 4 things that I try to think about every day as a manager.
Awesome. Cool. I like it. Let's talk about, how we're working together. So what is the background? Give us the background on this new community that you just started. There's probably folks out there that did not read your excellent LinkedIn post. So tell us just a little of the origin story of Revenue Collective of Color, RCOC, and why you think it's important that this exists.
Cool. So I won't go into the origin story of Revenue Collective, but it is helpful for folks to know and understand that, Revenue Collective is for folks that are, VP and above. And I was fortunate enough to be in the inaugural class of people in the Revenue Collective Associate Program, right? So this was for people that are director level and below, rising stars in their own right. It was about 6 or 7 of us, from directors, individual contributors, people on the client success side, and then myself, which was, young and early manager. And throughout the first year, I was given a lot of opportunities to learn, A, directly from you, Sam, and B, from other people in the Revenue Collective Associate Program, and then also kind of extend my tentacles out to direct Revenue Collective folks. So I was invited by you to attend one of the quarterly offsites, which was pretty cool, right? So I'm at this quarterly offsite and I'm jazzed up. Only 2 people from the Revenue Collective Associate Program are allowed to be there. So I'm kind of pumping out my chest a bit. And I'm in this room with, VPs of sales, chief revenue officers, entrepreneurs, consultants, and so on. You had at that particular offsite a VC or 2 come in and talk, and people were just throwing around numbers and figures that I didn't know were possible. So this was amazing for me. But during the event, one of the things that I wrote about in the article was I kept making eye contact with the bartender, and he was the only other Black person that was in the room, right? The only other person that looked like me. So there was this feeling of, that I didn't belong there. And I know that wasn't a feeling that was created on purpose, but looking around at all these people who are 10, 15, 20 years ahead of where I want to be, and not seeing anyone that kind of looked like me made me feel like, is this the right room for me, right? And there are definitely some people who that's their thing. They break down barriers. They're like, you know what, I'm going to be the first and all that stuff. But then there's another side, which is like, hey, I don't really see myself here. Should I be here? So a few days later, sent you an email essentially outlining that, and you were responsive. I know you don't want to get a whole bunch of praise, on your own podcast, but you were like, what can we do? How do we make this happen? So that was the foundation and the origin story for RCOC, Revenue Collective of Color. To quickly jump into RCOC, I will say that one of the quick things that I learned that I'll have to publicly correct you on your podcast is that people of color is definitely a group that goes beyond just Black folks. And for me, I didn't realize that the actual, I believe the title of the article that I posted on LinkedIn was, "We need to get more Black people in enterprise sales." But that was really the only direct reference to Black people. The rest of the post referred to people of color. So after I posted that, sales leaders with Filipino backgrounds, Latin American backgrounds, Caribbean backgrounds started reaching out to me like, hey, how can I get involved? What can I do? And that was the initial eye opener of like, okay, RCOC is going to be awesome, but Revenue Collective of Color is going to be from people who identify as a person of color. So while I only have the perspective of what it's like to be, a heterosexual Black male, there are other people who have very different backgrounds and experiences that are shared that are definitely welcome in RCOC and, of course, are welcome in Revenue Collective.
Well, thank you for saying that, Devante. It's a fascinating point, I guess, because I think to your point, first of all, obviously I know that people of color means more than just Black people. But you and me started this idea, I think, with that idea in mind of, anyway, it's just a complicated thing because a lot of other types of people are of color, but they don't have the same history with at least the United States that Black people do. And so it's
100%.
like they chose to come here, in a way that, I mean, we're in a sensitive space right now, but I think that's kind of like one of the points of having you on the podcast is to see if we can break down some walls and have some good, honest conversation. So I agree with you completely. People of color means a lot of different things, and no one thing is better than the other thing. And I also know that I specifically am also particularly, not most, but particularly motivated by making sure that Black people, specifically African Americans, feel extremely, extremely welcome within Revenue Collective. Because to your point, when you sent me that message, I mean, it just resonated. I don't know what that's like, to be honest with you. It's very rare that I walk into a room. I'm a minority, I'm Jewish, but nobody can tell that I'm Jewish well, some people can, I guess, but most people can't. Most people can't tell, and it's different. So I really appreciate you sharing that story because it's got to be hard. Staying on this topic that people don't often talk about. What is it like? What's your experience being a Black salesperson in corporate America? Whatever the company is. Again, we're not pointing fingers at any company. We love the Muse. We love every company I've ever worked for. It's not about that. But what's your experience when the reality is that most of the workforce is, looks different, is white or something that feels, I don't know. How do you feel about it?
For me, it's definitely something I notice immediately, right? I will quickly put one quick question back to you because I want to know what your answer is. When you walk into the room, what's the first thing that you're looking for? Just any room full of people, what's the first thing you're looking for?
I think I know what I'm supposed to say, and you're right. I'm looking for people that look like me.
Yeah, but when the whole room looks like you, it becomes something that's so natural that you don't even do it, right? So
Exactly.
For me, it's like when I walk into a room, I quickly scan. And it's not necessarily like I walk into a room full of no one that I know and I see the first Black person and I make a beeline to them and like dap them up and I'm like, yo, what's going on? I'm glad to see you in here. Like that's not my style. That's not who I am. But when you see a room full of people that is diverse and it's just like mixed, there's a level of comfort that's there for me that's not there otherwise. So that's just kind of the general, most companies that I've worked for, most rooms that I've walked into, that's just how I feel. Now there's a degree of, do people see me, right? Do they speak to me the same way they're speaking to everyone else that's in the room? Am I afforded the same opportunities everyone else is, not because of special treatment, but just because I'm there? That's important too. But for me as a seller, right, I think that's the really big difference because there's being a Black person in corporate America, which I believe like there's so much to unpack there. But also as a seller, there's like this credibility and this feeling of I'm going to sit down in a room. I've sat down in plenty of rooms, boardrooms, large tables, and it's myself and I'm selling to, 6, 7, 8 people and none of them look like me. And it's just this kind of irritating idea in the back of my mind. Like, are they paying attention to me? Is my Blackness somehow, not necessarily offending them, but are they seeing beyond that? Are they actually trusting me to be someone that can help them, right? Because that's what sales is. And for me, that was something that was always hard to get to go away. And, I could say, at the Muse, when I was an individual contributor, I closed about 79 deals and I went back and looked through all of them. And of those 79 deals, only 3 of them was the DM or someone on the decision-making team, a person of color that was at least introduced to me. So maybe there was someone in the background, but I think that was really big, right? Like to have such a small percentage be featured that way, like it's tough. And like, it even goes back to Nissan, right? Like I remember I was so excited to leave Apple, which was great from a retail perspective, but to leave Apple and go to Nissan, and I get there and the only other person that's a Black person there was a secretary. And she was definitely like at or around my mom's age, which was really weird because for me, it was like, hey, how do I print this? Oh, just ask, I believe her name was Danielle. I was like, just ask Danielle and she can do it for you. And I was like, I'm not asking Danielle to do anything that I can do my damn self because my mom would lose her mind if she knew I was doing that. So it's like, it's definitely an uncomfortable conversation. There's no right answer. I'm also not a D, E, and I expert, right? So this is just me speaking from my own perspective, but definitely like being a Black person in sales, it's always wondering, are they able to see past, my Blackness and just see me? And then once it gets like seeing past it, then it's like embrace it. And just like, I have my own experiences and I'm a regular person just like you are, but it's always something that's a little bit, daunting for me when I walk into that room or walk into that boardroom and I'm the only person there. It does feel like all of a sudden I'm the spokesperson for Black salespeople in New York City or something like that, which is definitely not the case.
Yeah, it's tough. Do you have people to talk about? I mean, before RCOC existed, who did you share these experiences with where somebody could nod their head and say, I know exactly what you mean? Did you have people that you shared that with?
No, I didn't. So I would talk to my dad about it. My dad has never worked in corporate America. I think he did for a little bit after college, but he's a coach and he's a teacher. But he has his master's degree. He's very well educated. He's started a few businesses. So I would get a lot of advice from him. But no, like of my friends and where I'm from, like typically it's like, okay, if you want to be successful, you should be like a doctor or a lawyer. And I think a majority of people from various backgrounds, that's how they feel, right? So it's not like a particular thing for Black people, but my best friend is an emergency room doctor in Chicago. We can't really talk about, what it's like to be in a sales position, but what I can say is when he had to choose his residency program, I was furious that he was leaving New York to go to Chicago. But when I asked him why he was doing that, he was like, I couldn't find another residency program that had a Black head of I think it was surgery or something. So it was like, I'm going to go to the coldest place in the world, or at least in America, and I'm going to leave my family and I'm going to do all this just so that the head of my department, who I will rarely even interact with, is a Black person. And that makes me feel comfortable. So even there, it's really unique to see how people from different backgrounds are doing that. But to get to your specific question, no, until joining Revenue Collective, until joining RCOC and being introduced to a few folks, I didn't have a mentor that was, a person of color, specifically in corporate America or in sales. Wow.
I mean, so it's just very different and very brave. I mean, it's hard. It must be hard to join corporate America in that context. What's your experience if we're all listening, people are listening, companies are listening, and you've had an experience, you have a gift card story you wanted to share. So let me ask you about that, and then I want to talk about, well, what can we do differently? Like, how do we make it so that the faces of corporate America more accurately reflect the faces of the United States and the world?
Yeah, I feel like when you introduce the gift card story, now it has to be so much more impactful.
I'm just
supposed to be an anecdote. So
going to be an amazing anecdote.
for those who aren't familiar, right? Obviously, salespeople have their compensation plan, which is usually put together between their base salary and their variable is tied to their bookings and so on. But occasionally, you'll run something called a SPIF, incentive program, whatever you want to call it, which is pretty much saying, hey, whoever does the most of X over this 3-week period, we'll give you a $100 gift card, something like that. The company that I was previously at, Muse, they're big fans of those. I think they actually work really well. But what we were doing was we had ran a particular SPIF that somehow netted out to close to $800 or $900 in gift cards that we needed to go and get. I hope there's no SEC issues with all this. Anyway, we had to go out and buy.
You want to buy gift cards?
Come on, man. Listen, so we went and we bought close to $1,000 worth of gift cards, and we're in the Duane Reade, and it's myself and the sales director, who happens to be a white woman, and we historically have had banter back and forth. She's a really good counterpart of mine. And she'd be like, hey, can you go to the store and buy the spiff this time? I'm like, no, hey, we're going to do a happy hour. Can you go and buy, a couple of bottles of wine? I'm like, yeah, I'll buy it. Venmo me, right? I'd always use my card because I'm never going to go and try to buy something with someone else's credit card. That's just, it doesn't make me comfortable. So we are at the Duane Reade, and we're there, we're buying $800 worth of gift cards, myself and my counterpart, the sales director, and she hands our boss's credit card to the cashier and it gets declined, right? Okay. Cashier runs it again, it gets declined. Cashier asks for her ID. She hands the ID and says, this is my boss's card. I'll call him just to get him to approve it. The cashier looks at the card. I won't name names, but their names are very different, right? Not even close to being something you could mistake at by looking quickly. But the manager comes over and proceeds to try and swipe the credit card again. So now we're up to 3 or 4 times of trying to run this Amex, and it continues to get declined. So my sales director, she calls our SVP of revenue, and she's like, hey, the card keeps getting declined. Can you, press 1 when Amex texts you or whatever to approve it? He says he did it. She tells him it gets declined again, right? So now we're up to, I believe, 4 or 5 times this card gets declined.
Yep.
And we're holding up a line. There's like 8 to 10 people behind us, and everyone's just being so accommodating. I'm like, wow, this is like, I've never seen this before. And finally, on like the 6th time, they swipe the card. It gets approved. It's like 7 or 8 different gift cards. And it's not one gift card. It's like every one they're scanning and trying to make sure it does the right way. So this is a bit of a process. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, I can't, this would never happen if it was me. But I just kind of put it out there in the environment. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. But there was one sales rep who was not there. And it also happened to be that there was a limit with the amount of gift cards. So we had to come back and buy one gift card that following Monday or Tuesday. And it was only for $100. So it wasn't a very large amount. So I get tasked with going to the store, using that credit card to buy a gift card. And I'm like, not really comfortable doing this. And I don't know how many ways I can try to explain that I'm uncomfortable doing this. I don't want to go in the middle of New York City to a store and try to buy a gift card with someone else's credit card. So anyway, I go to the store and the woman the gift card for $100. I hand her the credit card. And before she swipes anything, she's like, can I see your ID? And I'm like, all right, here we go. Take out my license, hand it to her, say, yep, this is my boss's card, buying a gift card for one of our employees. And she's like, no, sir, we can't do that. And I'm like, okay.
Is it the same Dwayne Reed?
It's the same Dwayne Reed, and it's the same cashier.
Oh, no.
The same cashier.
Jesus
and
Christ.
I'm like, listen, I'm not really sure what you want me to do, but I was definitely here last week. And I briefly kind of glossed over the scenario. And I was like, and your manager even came over to help. I was like, is your manager here? Thinking maybe the same gentleman was there and he'd recognize me. Unfortunately, he wasn't. And another woman comes over who's the manager for the day. I explain what happened. And I feel terrible because it's like, I'm asking you to do something that I know is technically wrong, but I'm also telling you that you did this already for someone else, so you should do it for me. And I'm getting frustrated and so on. So I can't get the gift card. She's starting to get a little upset, and she's nice. She doesn't threaten to call security or anything, but she's like, sir, I have no clue why that happened. There's no reason we would do that in the past. And I'm like, listen, not only did you do it, but it was a scene and it spent almost 20 minutes trying to sell us gift cards. But for me, that moment was really uncomfortable. But what bothered me the most was kind of coming back to the office and feeling like I can't tell this story to anyone. Right. And, I explained to the sales director, I was like, hey, you got to go buy the gift card. They wouldn't let me get it. And she's like, I don't understand why. Why wouldn't they do that? They just did that with me. And I was like, yeah, I know. So I think that's the disconnect, right? It's like there's a disconnect between what my reality is and someone else's is. And, I totally get it. But it was that moment of like, why wouldn't they just sell you the gift card? Right. Like it was like, no.
And that's
the card didn't get
privilege or whatever, which is
exactly.
Like our unconscious bias. It's like doors are open that we thought they were always open, and we never had to walk through them when they were closed or locked. They're closed or locked for different people all the time.
Yeah,
that's a powerful story.
I mean, it's little stuff like that regularly happens. That and it's not to get crazy political, but it's those random YouTube videos or Twitter videos of like someone just walking around the store and like getting followed and like little things like that. But that adds up because it makes you feel like you don't belong or you can't be trusted. So then you have this like age old adage of you have to be twice as good. And a large part of that is like you have to be twice as good because you can't leave any room for error, right? So when I was talking earlier about empowering my team as a manager and pushing people to play around the edges, I was the complete opposite because I was so nervous in the beginning about pushing someone too far and setting them off, feeling like I didn't have as much rope as my counterparts did, which I think changes over time, with confidence and so on. But yeah, it was like that ceiling that's there, that door that's there, that you don't even see it because it's already opened. Just going back to the story, it's just like, no, the card wasn't declined. The card didn't even get swiped. So, that there's a very big difference between what you were doing and I was doing. But yeah, that's my story.
I like that story. I mean, I hate it, but it's powerful. So what in our last few minutes together, Devante, what do you think can be done about this? Like, how do we change it? And frankly, given, it just doesn't, I get it that when I say it, coming from the place of privilege that I inhabit, I'm not trying to do this to wear a badge or to feel better about myself or anything. I really want to do it because I do want to help, and I don't want anybody to feel like to walk around this country or go into an office or just feel like they're not going to be treated the same because of how they look. I just don't like that, or what they believe or how they choose to dress. Although I do think people should dress professionally, of course. But
yes, you do.
Anyway, so but that's not anything to do with gender or race or anything like that. It's, you gotta look nice. What should we do? How should we? What ideas do you have to change this so that you can go in? I don't even know that you can go in with somebody else's credit card and buy at least it gets swiped right before it gets declined, as opposed to her not even giving you the benefit of the doubt. Like, is there anything? Do you have advice for companies on or managers or humans on how we can help change this reality?
Well, I think one of the things that you can do if you're not a person of color is like figure out how to be an ally in a natural way. I think again, I'll leave it to like the DEI experts, and hopefully we can bring them in and have conversations with them and so on. But one of the things is like figuring out how you can make people feel comfortable, right? How can you create an environment where everyone is welcome? You hear, the phrases like bringing your whole self to work, and something they said at the Muse, which I think they heard somewhere else, was like, diversity is being invited to the party and inclusion is being asked to dance, like all that good stuff. I get it. But it's just like engage, people for who they are, and don't be afraid if someone has a different background, like ask about them and get to know them and build those friendships and relationships. I think that's really important, right? If you're the type of person who like you're in the office and you realize that you're only gravitating towards a certain clique, but there's one or two other people that like, they just go home right after work. They're never at the events. I think it's easy to be like, oh, well, they just don't want to come. Right. Or they have things to do, right? Make a lot of assumptions, but no, it's like, give them the opportunity to tell you they're not interested in coming, right? Give them the opportunity, the same opportunities that you give everyone else. Don't just make those assumptions. So that's like on a peer-to-peer level. I think from a company perspective, it's the same, kind of D&I practices that folks have from a hiring perspective. If you're doing campus recruiting, don't forget about HBCUs and other organizations that, give kind of visibility to people of color and their backgrounds. So there's a lot of different things you can do. I'm sure there are a lot of different organizations that you can connect with. Ideally, RCOC in the future becomes one of them. And that's the exciting thing for me, is that when I wrote the article and we decided, to launch RCOC, all of a sudden, a lot of people who were directors and VP of sales that were people of color started reaching out to me. And I was like, oh, well, there you are. Right. So the exciting thing is that we're not reinventing the wheel here. There are absolutely people of color that are in leadership roles in sales and revenue, organizations. And now it's just getting them to come together. I think what's really interesting is I Googled Black in sales, right? Just to see if anything popped up, just to see what was out there. And the first thing that popped up was the Black Sales Forum, which I'm not promoting, another site out there, because the Black Sales Forum hasn't been updated in almost 2.5 years. What burned me up was the next 7 things on the Google search were Black Friday deals, like Black Friday sales, right? Like, so to me, there really hasn't been a concerted effort on building a community around people of color, on building a community around Black people that are in sales, marketing, customer success, these revenue generating roles. So I think simply by building RCOC and kind of following those core tenets of, creating that safe space within the revenue collective for people of color, creating, programming so that we can promote sales as a career opportunity for people of color, so that they're not like me, me when I first wanted to join the Muse and were like, well, no, I don't want to do sales. Show me the marketing jobs, right? So really giving people visibility into the learning potential and the earning potential that sales provides. And then just having them join communities like Revenue Collective and having them interact with people that are in positions where they want to be. Like those are the different steps that we can take. So, for me, I think that we're, not only talking the talk, but walking the walk and trying to create that space. And I think it starts with what we're doing right now, which is like having a conversation, understanding it's not going to be a polished conversation and there are going to be awkward moments, but we have like tons of, things in the years of being separated in so many different ways that we're trying to kind of rectify. It's not going to happen in one podcast. It's not going to happen in one day or 1 year, but just taking those steady steps towards, creating a place where everyone feels comfortable and confident walking into any room that they're in. It's not necessarily about swiping somebody else's credit card, but, we should get to the point where a few offsites from now, it's a very diverse group of people all sharing ideas and inspiring people from every background to get into sales and get into revenue generating roles.
Well said, sir. That's awesome. All right. Devante, thank you for that. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thanks for humoring me. And thanks for agreeing to partner together on this thing. So if folks are listening, and first of all, I'm fairly certain if you want a job, you'll have one by the time this thing comes out in like 2 or 3 weeks. But if folks want to reach out to you, maybe because they want to hire you, or maybe because they are of color and want to learn more about RCOC, what's your preferred method of communication?
Awesome. So it is email. I'll actually do the thing where I give people 2 different ways to reach me. For RCOC to talk about, my experience, to learn more about the Revenue Collective or our programming, you can actually reach directly out to me. Sam was great enough to give me a direct email. So it's Devante, Devante @revenuecollective.com. If you want to, chat about anything else, you can reach me at Devante, Devante LJ@gmail.com. So DevanteLJ@gmail.com for anything else, but specifically when it comes to RCOC, programming, working together, partnering, it's Devante@revenuecollective.com.
Awesome. Devante, we're going to talk to you on Friday for Friday Fundamentals, but thanks so much for being on the show. It was a fantastic conversation.
Awesome, Sam. Thank you for having me.
Hey, everybody. Sam Jacobs, Sam's Corner. I really, really enjoyed that conversation with Devante, and I thought it was really powerful. I thought the honesty and the way we were able to talk about it in a real way resonated with me personally, particularly that story about the gift cards and how just the different experiences people have. And sometimes when you're not aware, as I think about what is privilege, it's the idea that the door was open and you just assume it's open for everybody. You just assume that's the way the world is. And there are people where it is not like that. It is not like that for them. Certain doors that are open to some of us are not open to them. And we just assume that life is as easy as our life is, and that the challenges we face are the key challenges. And that's not the case for everybody in this country or the world. And so this conversation reminded me of that. I'm really glad that Devante is leading Revenue Collective of Color. If you wanted to apply to join, you can obviously go to revenuecollective.com. But it's not about that. Obviously, I'm talking my book when I talk about Revenue Collective, but it is about creating spaces and opportunities to make sure that the world of business and the world of sales looks more like the world. And I think that our work there as a human race, as the constituents and the voters of the United States, our work there has only just begun. So I thought it was a great conversation. Now, before we go, we of course want to thank our sponsors. The first is Chorus.ai. Chorus is a conversation intelligence platform that provides key insights into the sales conversation your team's having every day. Go to chorus.ai/sales hacker to try it for yourself. Our second sponsor is Outreach, the #1 sales engagement platform. They are revolutionizing customer engagement by moving away from siloed conversations to a streamlined customer-centric journey. If you want to reach out to me, you can linkedin.com/wherein/Sam F. Jacobs, and I'll talk to you next time.